It's not your job to change people's minds. It's just your job to do the best that you can. It's your job to lead by example.
What is up, guys? Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Whatever it is that you're doing to check out the show. It's another episode of the Connected Podcast. Super excited to introduce my guest today. I know I say that every single time, but I really do mean it when I say it. This guest of mine, Joe Vega, childhood friend of mine, someone I grew up with. Joe has played a huge part in my growth and my evolution spiritually, mentally over the past few years. Some of the things that I might not have even mentioned, we'll get into at some point. But Joe has played a huge part in my life, and he happens to be somebody that I've known since childhood. So, Joe, if you could, please introduce yourself. Let us know about who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Well, I just want to start off by thanking you. I'm honored and humbled to be here on your show. And we do go way back. And, my name is Joe Vega, and, we were born and raised in the Boogie Down Bronx, and John, you and I, we connected from a very young age, and, we've sort of been watching our own, each individual's progress through the years. And it's been great to see. There's mutual admiration here. We both came from the same place. But I originally started out in the Bronx and worked my way through a couple of the boroughs until I got through graduate school. And that took me into my physical therapy practice about 20 years ago. And I started out focusing a lot on physical rehabilitation, dealing with things like lower back pain, ankle pain, for both individuals, regular individuals, for athletes, for veterans. And I transitioned that into personal training. So I found a little niche where, at least early on, there was still this sort of empty void between the phases of physical therapy and wellness and fitness and personal training goals. So I saw it as an opportunity to sort of bridge the gap between those two things early. So, we're talking early 2000s, 2000, 2005, where I really started to carve out that niche. And that was something that took me into my own facility eventually later on down the line. And, it was really just putting everything together, putting together all of my experiences into this Vega method that I've been working on. It's sort of a culmination of that physical, but then also integrating the emotional and even the spiritual components for more of like a holistic approach. So,
well, don't give it all away yet, bro. We're getting there. We're gonna get to Vega method. We're gonna get to your specific style. We're gonna get to that because it's definitely something that I want to touch on. But before we even get into any of that, man, I think I've mentioned this before, but before we get into anything, bro, I truly want to give you your flowers while I have the opportunity to. And it's a common theme these days, but it's so important. It's so important that we lift each other up. We give each other the grace that we all deserve for the things that we've done, and I don't think that a lot of the time we take the time to do that. But I want to give you your flowers, bro, because, and you may not even know this, but back when I was still working in the hospital and in the healthcare industry for a while, I hadn't even thought about anything entrepreneurial. I had never thought about real estate yet. I was still, in the corporate cycle, 9-to-5 bullshit. And, you were a huge inspiration to me, bro, because you were one of the first people that I saw from my childhood that made it. And that was a big deal to me. And not just made it, but made it legally. you know, keep it real, right? That was huge to me, and honestly, you know, for me, it really got me into following your steps on social media and what you were doing with the gym and so on. And I was like, holy shit, this is Joe from, you know, Little League right in the building next door, like doing big things and really successful. And that was huge for me, bro. So, you know, I wanted to give you your flowers and let you know that, you know, for in that particular area of our relationship, you were a huge, huge inspiration for me, bro.
Wow. Well, listen, man, I love you for saying that, bro. That's a beautiful thing. You know, sometimes we get caught up so much in the hustle, you know, coming from the blue collar backgrounds that a lot of us come from. You know, sometimes we don't take a moment to reflect on those little moments for other people, the sort of you know, ambition that we might have, you know, just sort of rubbed off on them in a positive way. But I really appreciate that. That's something that, you know, I owe it a lot to my parents, you know, my dad especially, you know, who from a really early age just sort of gave me my background, gave me something to aspire to. I think a lot of times, you know, having that reference point, being able to say, okay, well, you know, I see my dad, I see him grinding, I see him doing his own thing. You know, I could do that too, you know. And for me, it was a big inspiration from him, just sort of seeing him carve out his own and seeing the struggles, you know, seeing him struggle. You know, listen, it took us a while to get to a stable position. You know, as is with most, you know, Hispanic, Latino, you know, Black, brown individuals who, for the most part, you know, like we're sort of the first in our family to do things like even have conversations about entrepreneurship, you know, to be able to speak about going to college or going to grad school, you know, like we're always like, it seems to be like the first in a line of many people, many men who just that we don't have that reference point.
Yeah.
So, you know, for me, it was a lot of, you know, not looking behind me because, you know, like we all know what was back here, you know, and for me, it was really like, how do you put your head down and just keep pushing and pushing, you know, to the other side. And a lot of times, you know, you lose sight of all the other stuff. And, but it's been a beautiful ride, man, but I definitely appreciate the flowers, man. Thank you.
No, of course, bro. Of course. You know, you touched on something that I wanted to ask about. You know, you mentioned that you had your dad as an example in an entrepreneurial space, and you know that's what kind of got you the motivation and put your blinders on and get into college, pursue this career, and then take it to the level that you took it. But you also mentioned the Latino aspect, the Hispanic aspect. And I wanted to ask about that because I remember early on, and I don't know exactly at what point in your career this was, but I remember early on visiting you at one of the gyms that you worked at, New York Sports and Racket Club, I believe, something like that, some kind of Hollywood shit in the city. And honestly, me going there as a client or as somebody to work out at the point that I was in my life, I still wasn't comfortable with myself yet. I still didn't know who I was yet. So I felt a bit uncomfortable. I felt a bit out of place. I was like, well, this is a little bougie. This is not really my kind of space and my environment. And it made me question what that was like for you as a Latino in this physical therapy, personal trainer space in that demographic. What was that like for you?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question because there was a lot of battling on a lot of stuff that I couldn't really show and a lot of stuff that I suppressed. And it really began for me in grad school where, you know, I went to a pretty good school A very small class for physical therapy, but I was definitely the only Latino in the mix. And I always had this feeling that I didn't belong there. You know, there was always this, it got so bad that I actually developed a stutter in grad school, and I had never had it before. And, you know, it was a lot about my throat, just, you know, really accepting and having the confidence in what was coming out of my mouth, or just in me having the confidence and the self-esteem to know that I belong there. Again, that has a lot to do with not having that reference point, not really knowing what to expect, not knowing what to look for. So for me, you know, it was really a difficult moment from that point on moving forward, because I always aspired to work with people to help them rehabilitate them, get them back from injuries. But at the end of the day, a big part of me didn't necessarily feel like I belonged in that space yet. And I will tell you that, to be honest, it wasn't really the facility that really drew me in. It was going to the gym and seeing who the trainers were, and seeing my Latino brothers, my black and brown brothers who, you know, very similar to the individuals that I grew up with, and being able to connect with them on a deep level. And that gave me some comfort, and it took a lot of the stress off of me being in the physical therapy space, because again, I was a minority in that space. You know, there weren't a whole lot of people that looked like me back then. You know, I'd even make a case for it today. But it was a nice balance for me being in the gym. And again, I wasn't really about the space. It was beautiful. But again, it was a great way for me to connect with people that looked like me, and it motivated me to push further into that space.
And when you say it was a great opportunity, you mean as far as connecting with clients or other trainers and PTs that looked like you?
Yeah, well, a little bit of both. You know, like it gave me an opportunity, one, to be around people that looked and sort of come from the same backgrounds that I come from. And also it put me in a great position where, you know, I wasn't just getting people who were coming to physical therapy who were not compliant with what they were supposed to be doing. And, you know, there's always that compliance issue that you have in the rehab setting, where you may have a handful of people that do everything you tell them to do, and they wind up getting good results. But in the gym setting, that just seemed to flip. It seemed like everybody was there to do things like lose weight. They were there to get stronger. It was men, it was women, sometimes it was kids. And they came in with their credit cards and their money, and they wanted to get the results. So for me, it was really the first time where I was able to take people with pain and not just get them to feel better, but also get them to experience some of the fitness goals that, you know, a lot of us aspire to, but are limited because of some chronic injuries that we deal with. So it's a little bit of everything, you know, in terms of that transition.
Yeah, I get it. So with that being said, and I don't want to make this into a thing of, you know, I just try to make it relatable to myself. Mm-hmm. You know, when I became a realtor, or when I really became passionate about real estate, it was all initially about wanting to learn the business, learn the industry. And I had this burning desire and passion to want to go help my community, wanting to go help the people that looked like me, and either show them this business so that they can do it themselves, or B, show them how to build some wealth and home ownership and so on and so forth. And that changed pretty quickly for me. That changed. No, I'll be honest. That changed very quickly for me, and not because I didn't want to. It was because, you know, you can't want things for people more than they want it.
Yeah.
And I found myself in this place where I was like wanting to, you know, force a mindset shift on a community that just wasn't ready for it or just couldn't, fathom the idea of it being for them. And I know that for you in the personal trainer space, because I have a lot of friends that are personal trainers, and they tell me things that what they struggle with is getting the client to get over the pricing part of it, right? Like, Jesus Christ, like, a personal training session is $100, $150, $200 per session, right? So does it feel like because of you knowing your worth, you knowing your education, you knowing what level of service you're going to provide, this is the bar, this is what I charge, this is what it is, getting to convey that same value that you understand to the client base? Does that happen to be an issue for you in certain demographics, or is that across the board? What is that kind of situation for you?
Yeah, no, I had a similar situation early on in my career. I tried to do what I could to instill these values of health and exercise, just the basic fundamentals early on. And a lot of it was just to be there to kind of support as much as I could. But I learned a lot from my dad. His partner was a Jewish man. And this man was, one of the kindest, one of the nicest men that we had ever known. And he was really one of those first people to kind of give my dad a chance. So from pretty early on, we had a lot of diversity in our circle. So, okay. As I moved closer and closer, into the beginning of my career, there was definitely some of that where I wanted to give back, but the hunger that I had just to help people was a bit more than just trying to be selective about a specific graphic.
Okay.
And listen, the way the numbers work out, it's just the reality of things. You know? And I try not to take it personal. Like I don't make it. And I know a lot of people that do beautiful jobs with this, and they're they're a lot more in the community, and they're doing everything they can. Some of them are doing a lot of free work, and I get that, and I respect them. But for me personally, I've always been in a position where I've been exposed to lots of diversity, and I see that as a strength that's helped guide me through my career, where I've been able to, tap into different resources that might not have been available to me. And I understand at this point in my career that, you sort of have to have this open mind, and you have to be receptive to different ideas, to different cultures, in order to really be able to give back, even be in a position to give back,
Yeah.
So, it's not, like you mentioned earlier, like it's not your job to change people's minds. It's just your job to do the best that you can. It's your job to lead by example. And the small percentage of people that make that choice and say, you know what, the same way you looked at me, there's probably many people that are looking at you and saying, look at what John's doing. He's speaking out. He's creating a platform. I want to be a part of that. I want to do that. And they probably have already hit you up asking for advice, and to me, that is, even if you get one person that you can have that sort of impact on, I think it's completely worth your while. And you just need to keep doing what you're doing. And eventually over time, people, if they value it enough, they'll jump on the bandwagon.
Absolutely. And I think honestly too, bro, I think, sometimes we have to let go of our idea of what certain things look like. Because for me, and I give you an example of like what giving back was going to look like for me, right? Like, okay, I'm a high school dropout. I'm a convicted felon. I'm making all this money. I'm successful. How do I give back to my community? And it was always like, in a way that I perceived it to be. But yet, like you mentioned, there will always be opportunities that would come up that I would never imagine that would allow me the space and give me an opportunity to give back, just not in the way that I thought it was going to be. It was packaged a little bit differently. Exactly. But nonetheless, take me through, all right, you're at a private gym, at a private sports club, you're doing your thing there. How do we go from there to you owning your own studio and doing your own thing over there?
Oh man, that's a great story, man. It's a great question, a great story. And it didn't go down the way that you might think. It actually, there was quite a bit of trauma that was attached to that. So I began my scaling process, just building my team probably around the time when my son came on the scene. So we're talking 2015 and 2014, I really began this process of attempting to scale and to build a quality team that could help offset the amount of hours that I was doing and allow me to generate passive income. And I was able to do this within the confines of somebody else's studio, which was great. So my overhead was at a pretty low point compared to what other people would have to pay for a brick and mortar space. So,
hold on 1 second, Joe. I don't mean to cut you off. I just want to get some clarity here. So what you're saying was, under the umbrella or under the space that you were at, was it the volume of clients that you had that you now needed leverage and said, okay, I have this overflow of clientele. Exactly. Let me bring in, that's what, okay.
Yes. So it was a combination of that. It was, I kept getting into the same issue over and over again, where I would take on a certain amount of clients. I would take on a certain volume, and I would always get to the same point before things began to start unraveling, right? So I was putting a little bit too many hours in, and it was impacting the amount of quality that I was giving to each person. So that, combined with, my wife getting pregnant, put me in a space where I was like, okay, we've got this surplus. Now we could begin the process of scaling back. So that way, one, I don't have to continuously run into this problem of, not being able to provide quality care because I'm doing way too many hours during the week, which is a good problem to have. But then I also have a child coming in, and I just didn't want to place the entire burden on my wife. We don't exactly get paternity leave in in my industry. And for me, it was really important to not wait for that to happen to begin that process. So I was fortunate enough to be able to start that process pretty early. And it got to the point where for the next couple of years, up until about 2017, where I had a team of like about 6 or 7 people that were working for me, doing personal training, doing physical therapy, massage therapists. I had a couple of massage therapists. I even had a Reiki specialist at one point, and we were killing it. We were crushing it. And in early 2017, I got a message from the owner of the space letting me know that, unfortunately, he was going to have to close down the part of the gym that I was running my business out of. So this was he gave me about 30 days notice to decide what I wanted to do. And, but basically told me, like, you need to find another place, or you can go to this other place that I have that's about half the size. So that put me in a really, really difficult position, because there was no way for me to continue to run my operation. It was an operation at that point, out of his space, without downsizing. So I wound up having to lay off a bunch of people, and I stood with 2 other individuals that were working for me. And we moved to a much smaller space, and I took a big hit, when it came to the amount of clients that I would wind up working with. But we kind of battled back. The same year, 2017, we were grinding it out, and we got to about the second quarter of 2017, and then we made this big push to just get our own space. And I wound up having about 6 clients at the time that all volunteered to sort of step up and put up capital to put us into our own space. So we worked out some deals, and it took a little while to get everything together, to lay out the structure. But by the third quarter, we had found like our perfect space. We took that capital and we, had some equipment from the previous studio and found a spot, signed the lease, and the rest was history after that. So, with a lot of heartache, with a lot of trauma, we wound up, winning out and getting the space that we wanted.
That's dope, man. That's dope. I wouldn't even expect it to be that your clientele, but that speaks to their trust in you and the level of service that you guys were providing, that they said, hey, we don't even necessarily need to call it a partnership, but we're willing to invest in you guys. So that's pretty dope, man.
Yeah.
So you're in the space, I want to say somewhere, like approaching 2018, right?
Yeah. March 2018, that's when we opened the doors.
So I know that at that time, and this is just off of what I recollect, because I like I said, I was watching you very closely, and I remember at one point you kind of like pivoted with branding when you got into the new studio, and it became a little bit of and correct me if I'm wrong, like kickboxing kind of, that was kind of like one of the modalities, I guess, that you were kind of working with at that time. How did that come into play? Why was that? What was that like for you at that point?
Yeah, you go in with the plan. Anytime you begin any business endeavor, and for us,
you get punched in the face, right?
Yeah, exactly. To said that, right? We all have a plan until you get punched in the face. Well, I got punched in the face probably within the first 2 months of us being open, and there's a lot of ego early on. When you enter into a brick and mortar lease and you're trying to build this business, and there's still a lot of dust that needs to be settled within, especially that first quarter that we were in there. And we went in there with the intention to do private personal training, some physical therapy, and we had a couple of classes that had worked for us in the previous space, and we assumed that all we needed to do was transition all of that and just plug and press play, and everything was going to be successful. You always think that if you build it, they're going to come.
Yeah.
And we realized pretty quickly just how difficult it was to just get people in the door. And remember, this is pre-pandemic, so there's a number of platforms that we wound up having to use that, sort of put us in this position where we had to discount our rates in order to get people to come into our classes. But we needed to have classes that were deemed popular at the time. So what we wound up messing around with was getting a boxing class together. That was the first experiment that sort of took us away. You speak of pivoting away. And being able to address the ego that's attached to that and saying, okay, well, you know what? I know what the bigger picture is, right? The bigger picture isn't me just being successful in the things that I want to be successful in. Sometimes it doesn't happen right away like that. Sometimes you got to do something, like start a boxing class, which we didn't anticipate doing. And that gave us a lot of really good attention. And people started noticing us a little bit more because of the popularity of boxing. And we had still opened up prior to a couple of our other competitors at the time opening up. So there was only a few boxing studios in that Flatiron Union Square area. So we were able to capitalize on that. We made some money, but then we also wound up getting new people into the space, who were interested in doing the class. So, and then that graduated into kickboxing. We all had kickboxing backgrounds. So we were one of the only spaces that you were able to do boxing and kickboxing at the time. So, it was just a way, whenever we speak about pivoting, and, I know we've had conversations outside of the podcast about that, I always stress, trying to really take the ego out of the equation and really understand the bigger picture, the long-term goal, understanding that it's not selling out. It's not saying, okay, well, you know what, I'm going to go against the grain and go against everything. Like, no, there's a balance that we need to have where, you can have whatever plan that you want, but if nobody's coming through the door, then, there's changes that need to be made. So it was a really good, timely change that we made that definitely put us on the map a lot more than what we were prior to that.
Yeah, so I mean, it almost sounds like, that kind of saved you guys to some degree. That change of branding, and that's dope. Another thing, I'm sounding like an investigator here because I was like watching you, like so. I'm a student of the game, man, of everybody, every industry. I'm fascinated to see how people do things and how they get by and so on and so forth. But another thing that I had noticed you starting to incorporate was a lot more, and I don't know if this was something you always incorporated, but I started to see it be more prevalent and more advertised, I guess, in your work, was the mindfulness stuff, right? Like starting to see you talk a lot more about connecting mind and body, and starting to see where you were incorporating like meditation things into, your services. So when did that kind of come about, and how did that become a thing for you to start introducing to your clients?
Yeah, well, that's something that I fought really hard bringing into the studio, to be perfectly honest with you. It was something that was so sacred to me, my mindfulness practices, whether it's my meditation, my breath work, my own programs that I do to really work on my mind and connecting holistically. But the pandemic came. The pandemic came, and there was a noticeable, not just a drop in volume. I mean, obviously there was a drop in volume of many businesses, many industries. But what I would notice was that the people that would come to the studio, they weren't really present. They weren't really there. They were there in body, but there was a big part of them that had this apprehension about being there, right? There was this feeling, this anxiety that was palpable, that was prevalent throughout their entire sessions. And there were many times where people were battling back tears. There were times when trainers were battling back tears. And it got to a point where I said to myself, and this was a lot of my own meditation went into this. It was saying, you know what, it's time. It's time for us to begin the process of integrating this into our routines. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to figure out what that was going to look like, because I didn't want to pivot completely away from the martial arts stuff that we were doing, the boxing and the kickboxing. So it really took a lot of beta testing. And this is what I always try to look for silver linings and things. And when it came to the pandemic, what it really did was give me the opportunity to work on this style of programming and figuring out a way to integrate it in a unique way that wouldn't push people away, because, let's face it, most people, when you talk to them about things like meditation and breathing, they just turn off, they go somewhere else. It's like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but again, I don't have that reference point. Like, I don't have family members that taught me growing up how to meditate or taught me the importance of breathing from my belly. There was never this connection of that. So for me, I had to become that reference point. And what I did was I put myself out there first. Like I gave people an idea of the battles that I've had with anxiety. I really put myself out there, like on my social media, and allowed myself to be vulnerable when it came to talking about my past that involved panic attacks, that involved high anxiety, that involved depression, that involved suicidal ideation. People look at you and it's like, well, wait a minute, you look this certain kind of way, you look great, we see the success. How is it possible that this happens to you, or this has happened to you? So for me, it was really putting myself out there and sacrificing this sort of macho masculinity that was just this surface level version of myself. And, that worked beautifully early on, because a lot of people, they were able to connect. It resonated with them, and then I finally landed on the boxing. I came up with the class called Box and Breathe. And it was like, well, wait a minute, how do you, like, everybody thinks about meditation with yoga. There's always this connection with calm and calm, So how about, but when we leave here and we're dealing with the pandemic and we're dealing with the stress in our lives that evolves around caring about ourselves and also about our loved ones who, might be at risk for maybe not making it through this pandemic. How do I take these tools and apply them to my daily life, right, outside of the gym? And for me, being able to kind of bring in some of the stuff that I've done in the past when it came to plant medicine, getting into my own journeying and meditations, I basically was able to pull in a lot of the science behind that and into the programming that really put people in a position to get exactly what they came in for, but then the extra bonus, which was now, these people were doing the boxing and the high intensity exercise, but then we were pulling them back down into their bodies with the guided meditation. And they just, immediately, like we were getting people that were loving, that they never experienced it, but they loved it. And we were getting, the tears, like people would, angry, lashing out, but it was a lot of like pent up aggression that needed to come out, and once we were able to see that, then the next session they would come in and there would be a next session, you'd notice that they were a lot lighter in that session, and it wasn't about like this surface level anxiety, it was about, okay, now I understand that part of being a warrior, part of the whole aspect of being brave and courageous is saying, okay, I fear something, but I'm not going to let this fear paralyze me to the point where I'm not going to let myself, institute my self-care regimen. I'm not going to let it mess with my routine. I'm going to keep pushing through, right? So it was really the beginning of just really pulling inward with that holistic programming. And that, I was able to package that, in the class setting, in the small group setting, and also in the one-on-one setting. And I just found myself just being dramatically passionate about it. And it gave a lot of meaning to what I was doing, because it could get very superficial in my industry. And it was the first time I feel like in my career where I was doing something that had a much deeper meaning to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can see that. I was actually just going to ask you that, because very similar thing happened to me in my business. When I started to experiment. I don't even want to say experiment. When I started to dive into the plant medicine world and I started doing all of these things, and finally came back to integrate with the rest of the world and get back into the day-to-day nuances of my job and my business and so on, it gave me a newfound appreciation for what I did. It made me dig a lot deeper with clients. You know, it made me like start asking questions I didn't necessarily ask before. Like, why do you want to buy this house? You know, and starting to see like family dynamics where like I would be greeted with a family or a broken family that was thinking like, okay, you know, let's just pack up and move and buy a new house over here and it's going to solve everything. And, you know, I found myself in a position where I had to try to navigate those situations and advise them differently, not advise them from a financial, you know, place of this is a wealth vehicle and all that financial bullshit, to actually tell them like, okay, why are we doing this? You know, why are we buying this house? So I definitely could appreciate that. And, you know, you said something there, where, you know, you mentioned your plant medicine experiences, and that's difficult. That's difficult to talk to people about that you know and trust, and even family. So was that something, a hurdle for you with now talking to your clients and saying like, hey, this is the root of where my new direction, my new modalities are coming from? How was that kind of conversation with clients? I'm sure that kind of created some angst as well.
Well, you know, we develop a great rapport with my clients, and you know, listen. And for me, early on, I did suffer from that. There's this whole new like set of depression that you wind up getting when you come back from your plant medicine journey, and a lot of that has to do with what you just said. You know, like I don't have, anytime you have a profound experience doing something, whether you know you made a great deal selling a house, you know, the first thing you want to do is talk to your loved ones about it. You know, you want to share that. Like it's not, I don't want to hold on to that. You know, I want to know, I want them to know that I'm making all these powerful moves. But when it comes to stuff like plant medicine journeys, you know, there's a very small circle of people that you'll find that you can really confide, and it takes a long time for you to get to the point where you actually find those individuals, and you know you're comfortable speaking to them, and you know more often than not, it's not people that you know.
Yeah.
But you know, I've had family that I've expressed this to, and you know, people receive it, and I guess it really boils down to like what you need from them. You know, because sometimes we just need to speak, and we don't necessarily need the validation connected to it. So for me, a lot of it was just getting stuff off of my chest. And, you know, most people, especially your family, are not necessarily prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
But it is what it is. If it's something that's really powerful to you, then, you know, they respect it or they don't. But either way, you notice that your circle is going to get a little bit smaller. And it's very difficult at first. But at the end of the day, like that, when it comes to transitioning into business, I think one of the most important things is you start realizing what's really important to you and what isn't. Like as you want, or at least for me, like around like authenticity really became one of those values that I strove for I was passionate about it. You know, like I had gotten to a point where I had created this facade for long enough, you know, and people, what winds up happening when you're that person that everybody looks up to and deems to be successful, one of the things that happens is nobody reaches out to you. You know, nobody checks in with you. You know, you're the one that's out there helping everybody else. You know, people are congratulating you, but nobody ever stops to really ask you, like, how are you doing? You know, so for me, it got to a point where I had to let people know, like, listen, like this, I'm not going to keep playing this game where I'm just going to suppress things and just, you know, go to the gym and exercise and lift heavy weights and come off as this, you know, well-to-do, well put together individual. Like we all have our trauma. We all have our issues that we have to confront, and being able to do that with your community, with your family, is very important, especially early on in the healing phase. So for me, with my clients, you know, it got to a point where, listen, this is what it's about. And as a professional, this is my recommendation for you, right? And I lay it out for them. You know, listen, that we keep getting to the same point, the same points during our journey. When it comes to physical fitness, you know, you get on a good run with somebody, and then for whatever reason, boom, they hit an obstacle, they hit a roadblock. It could be in the form of their own trauma that's coming to the surface, that's rearing its ugly head. And, you know, they backtrack, they pull back, or they go on a vacation because they can't figure out a way to internalize their struggles. So they think, okay, let me book a trip to go somewhere and forget about it for a week or two. And then I'll come back and somehow magically I'll just, you know, push myself right back into the mix and everything is going to be great. So, you know, it took me sitting down with some of these people, you know, and really having some difficult conversations with them. Because ultimately, as a professional, you know, and you know this, like your bottom line is going to dictate how successful your business is. Okay, yeah. So if you keep getting people to come on and they're not ready, you know, mind, body, spirit, then you're ultimately going to pay the price, because you're going to have people that are not going to follow through on what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, and a lot of them are going to blame you for it. You know, they're going to blame you because you didn't do what you were supposed to do when you were supposed to do it. So, you know, again, authenticity, it really brought me to a point where I took a hard look at my business, and I asked myself, how do you want to keep playing this game where you're just making some money, you know, and then eventually you get the turnover, right? And then you got to think about getting your next person, you know, or you could say, you know what, this is how it's going to be moving forward. Like, we've got to talk about meditation, or at least you come to me and you tell me, how are you dealing with this situation? You know, are you going to church, or do you have a therapist? I just need to know that these areas can't be left unchecked.
Yeah.
Because everything, again, with the plant medicine, it educated me on how interconnected everything is. Mm-hmm. For me to continuously say, okay, well, here, do these exercises and you're going to feel great, you know, mind, body, spirit. That's me being full of shit.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing you a disservice by trying to sell you, you know, and I see a lot of coaches, they haven't had that kind of enlightenment yet, where they're still, you know, they're still feeding people the stuff that they were, you know, that they learned early on, instead of progressing and taking the next step in their evolution to really fortify and develop a more well-rounded approach that can really mean the difference between somebody, you know, maybe hanging out for a little bit, but then cutting out and putting you in a position to try to recoup that somewhere else.
So let me ask, so do you think that it's more so on the trainer or the client, or is it hand in hand? Because I can only speak from my own experience. And I went through all these different phases when it comes to fitness, you know, I went the steroids route. I wanted to be a monster and like fucking lift cars and do stupid shit. Like I thought that I wanted to be huge and jacked and all this nonsense, and damn near killed myself to do it. And then I had this phase where, and obviously there's mental things and spiritual things behind me even doing that. But I get to a point where I'm at now where I just had this conversation with the dude I was in my gym this morning, where I said, you know, I'm more concerned about my mobility right now than anything else. Like, I'm not concerned about how big my gut looks, you know, whether I'm ripped, I'm jacked, I'm shredded. I want to be able to not moan and groan getting out of bed. I want to be able to move. And I think that obviously comes with maturation and evolution of the person themselves. So how much of that is, okay, maybe the trainer isn't there yet mentally, but I would imagine that it kind of goes hand in hand with the client, right? Like where their mental state is at to be open to that, right? Because if I'm just wanting to do steroids and get jacked and look a certain way or be a professional bodybuilder, I don't really want to hear Joe telling me that I got to meditate and I got to fucking connect my mind and soul. So how do we even kind of measure, you know, in your space, like, are they here yet? Are they not? And then how do you proceed with that if you feel like they're not necessarily open to that? So you know that they're going to plateau in their fitness or whatever. How do you handle that?
Well, I think it starts with the professional. You know, I think that having the courage to step into your truth when it comes to whatever it is that you're passionate about versus what you think you're supposed to be doing, you know. And I think early on in your career, you know, you have bills to pay, you have a lifestyle that you want to live. So a lot of the choices that you're made are geared towards putting you in a position that, you know, you can pay your bills and you can go on your vacations or you can go out on dates. But I think as you get older, and not just getting older, but, you know, you push yourself into more unique experiences. You know, for me, you know, my experiences with consciousness, they really pushed my maturity level pretty quickly. So for me, you know, I really feel like being able to really with conviction figure out what it is that you want to do, figure out who it is that you want to work with, and understand that the more truth you put out there about what you want to do, what you're all about, it serves as a filtering tool.
Got it.
So if you get enough people that do that, the message that sends to the potential clients is, okay, well, you know, I'm starting to see this change. I'm starting to see this shift, right? Like if you're really paying attention now, like for example, you know, you'll start noticing that a lot of the boutique gyms in the city and in many places are starting to close down. Right? So what does that mean? That means that, you know, things are going to start gravitating more. They're going to return back to the big box setting, right? So what does that do for you as a potential client or someone who wants to find a membership somewhere? Now you're starting to notice that, you know, because of what's happening, you know, post-pandemic, what's happening, people not being able to stay open, now your opportunities are dwindling, right? So, you know, the client has to do their research. They have to see the trends that are popping up out in front of them, you know, and they have to really do some soul searching. But, you know, again, it starts with the coach. It starts with the professional. You know, we basically are in a position, and this has always been true even before social media, where we create the product. You know, we create the service, and people, you're either on board with it or you're on your own with it, right? The more flexibility that I put into what I do, the more, you know, breaks I give to people and try to adhere or customize. it leaves a lot more room for me to not be in my passion, to not be in my authentic space, and it takes away from my ability to provide the best service possible. So it takes a lot of soul searching. It takes a lot of work. But I think for any professional, no matter what industry you're in, really being able to stick to your guns and saying, okay, I want to focus in this space. I want to do this very specific, and just starting to do your inventory on yourself, right? And putting up those filters, because you're going to get people that are going to come to you, and they may mean well, but they're going to wind up wasting your time, right? Time is money. Yeah.
So we went from the big gym to the private gym to the kickboxing to the box and breathe to your own niche, your Vega method, and you've talked a little bit about that. So obviously, school or the original position or career of PT was premeditated, right? You went to school. This is what I want to do. I got to go to grad school. But all right, cool. So where are you now on that journey? And what are you into now? What are you pursuing now? Your clients, what does that look like for you right now?
Yeah, so I closed my studio in January.
Congrats.
Yeah, no, it was it was a really difficult decision for me to come to, but I received an opportunity from my landlord, and we were able to he gave me the chance to step away, handing the keys, and I sat with my family and my wife, and we spoke about it, and we took into consideration everything that has happened up until this point. We all decided that it was in the best interest for me and the rest of my family for us to move on. And it was something that a lot of ego was wrapped up into it early on, where you say, okay, I'm getting the signs, you're bleeding from the pocket, there's no funds available, but you're still scrounging to figure it out. And it got to a point where we were like, you know what, like why do we want to bring that into 2023?
Yeah.
Like why? So, again, I thank my family for that. My wife, who helped support me through that, still helping out. But I made the choice, handed in the keys, and I began to bring everything, all of my equipment up to my home, up to my home, upstate New York. And now for me, it's great. It's a great feeling. I almost feel like a free agent, I'm sort of throwing a bunch of things on the wall that I've always wanted to do, but I've been limited with time. I've been limited with energy, limited with resources, because when you have a brick and mortar lease, that is the central thing in your life. So now that I don't have that, so it really became about how do I take my Vega method that I've built over the last 3 years and integrate it into different aspects of wellness. So I was able to step into corporate wellness. One of the things that I'm doing now, and I'm looking to step more into that over the next couple of months. I've taken on my first big corporate real estate client, and it's really about being able to develop a wellness initiative. There's a lot of companies that are starting to pivot into wellness because they see what's happening with their employees. They're seeing how they've been impacted by the pandemic. Even till today, there's still a lot of people that have apprehension about coming into the office. And it's even on the business side of things, it costs something when you lose employees. When you lose employees, when your employees get hurt. So there's, many of these companies have incentives to tap into wellness. So, they're a lot more receptive to it now than they've been in the past. So for me, again, speaking on pivots, it just seemed like a very natural pivot for me to take on clients that were more like business, big business entities as opposed to just individual people. And that, very excited, very scared. It's very scary, but it's very exciting. And I'm looking forward again to stepping into a bigger audience, getting in front of more people to sort of convey these very important essentials that I've been putting together over the past few years. But that having people come to my home and working with them here has been really nice. And then I've been getting more into my food, my baking. It's one of the hobbies that I've always had that, again, I put on hold. I was going to start a whole bar business before I opened the gym, laid out all the work, the foundation for it. And then I went over to California to see how they make them, and it tastes like trash. So I just scrapped the whole thing. We were so upset. So now for me, I'm actually maybe teaming up with a couple of my clients who are looking to get into the food industry, who are interested in backing some of the products that I have. So very exciting time for that.
That's dope, man. And that's why I say congrats. A lot of people will most likely say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, you had to let go of your studio. And I don't see it that way. I not only don't see it that way, I don't feel that for you. I think that you definitely, I don't want to say mastered your craft in that space, but mastered your craft in that space. And the universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it, has a really funny way of nudging us into our next space and into our next chapter. And I think that's dope, man, because I'm sort of in a very similar space myself. And it is scary as fuck. It is like, well, damn, what am I gonna do? And taking that first step of letting that part of your identity go is huge, because that becomes a part of your identity. I'm Joe with the studio, and I think that it gives us a huge opportunity to redefine ourselves. I just spoke to somebody about this the other day. I said, my definition of success is so different now. It's so different. And when I talk to other people that are quote unquote successful, it's intriguing to me to see how they define it, because I knew what it was for me at one point. Make a lot of money, buy a lot of hot shit. You did it.
Yeah.
Until you're on a ventilator, Yeah. And you wake up and you're like, thank God I can breathe, and that changes everything for you. And that's what it was for me anyway.
Yeah.
So, I'm happy to hear that, you took that step, because sometimes, man, the ego will keep you there. You'll fucking keep trying to figure it out, and
but that's how we're taught. We're taught that it's really about working hard. So instead of doing 12-hour days, you'll do 16-hour days. And next thing you know, you're so far removed from all the reasons that you got into it in the first place that you can't even recollect, like why am I still here? And for me, it was like, okay, well, that I did that because that's what I felt like I needed to do, because I was still in that mindset of, okay, I need to be the man. I need to be the top dog. and I had this trauma from getting kicked out of one space. So I'm like, all right, well, I don't want to get kicked out of another space again. So let me be the owner of my own space so I can't kick myself out.
Yeah.
And that's where it came from. But, after a while, it's like, you know what, if you're great at what you do, you can do it anywhere. You could do it in a number of different situations. That's what's great about 2023. There's many different mediums that we can be creative, and we could do our things that I couldn't even do in 2017. In 2017, things haven't evolved the way they have now. There was no Zoom. There was no, virtual anything. So, no, man, it's just being able to step away and just let it go.
That's dope, man. That's dope. If you had to give, because I always like to try to give my audience and my listeners, and it's funny, man. Like, I don't do a podcast because I want to be the number one podcast, or like I do this because, and I named it what I named it because I've been so blessed. Like, God has blessed me and connected me with so many amazing people, and me being able to connect other people with them is huge to me. And whether it's one person, I always get at least 2 or 3 people that will watch an episode and message me and say, oh, I got this from that, or this was awesome, whatever. So I always try to ask the people that I'm interviewing or talking to give them something, right? So if you were to give somebody, someone who's never worked out, someone who's never meditated, someone who has no clue of anything, health and fitness or wellness, what's one small routine or something that they can start to incorporate that will start to get them on the path to getting where they want to be physically and mentally and spiritually?
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, it starts with believing in yourself, and I'm big on affirmations, and all we're basically doing with affirmations is really trying to reprogram our mind, the beginning phases. And it's very similar to actual physical, lifting, squats, bench press. The more repetitions that you put into it, the better it winds up becoming. So the more, you state your affirmations, the more your body begins to accept them. It begins to believe what it is that you're trying to say. So, for me, being able to lead with the mind, and the body will eventually follow suit. But in the beginning, it's really important for you to have your affirmations ready to go. It's just short little sayings that are positive, that are going to fill you up. And for some of us, our cup, is pretty depleted. So every opportunity, I'd say 5 minutes a day, you start out just by getting a list of affirmations. And it's just very simple. I deserve to feel better. I deserve to be strong. Okay. I deserve to be of sound mind, body, and spirit. Right. This is how I lead. We set our intentions. Okay. What are exactly our intentions? Like, what are we here to do? What is our goal? What is our aim? Okay. Why are you doing what you're doing? Are you doing it because you authentically feel you want to do this? Or do you feel pressure coming from family, pressure coming from a significant other? Are you here for any other reason other than for yourself? Okay. So a lot of the questions that I ask early on to my people, and that I advise to people that aren't working with me, is really try to get to the root of why you're there in that place to begin with. Why are we here? What is it that we expect? A lot of people write this stuff down. You can write this stuff down in a nice little journal, or you can just have it ready to go in your mind. As soon as you start figuring out exactly what it is that you want to do, that's when we can begin the process of putting together certain exercises and movements that can get you towards what your goals and intentions are, right? Very basic, we do a lot of virtual stuff where it's, just some basic range of motion. Like, you'd be surprised of just moving your arms around, moving your spine around. A lot of the self-assessment tools that I do for my self-inventories are actually exercises in of themselves, right? So just continuously moving. If we're sitting for long periods of time, getting up and moving around. Squats are great. Just sitting in and out of your chair 10 times, 20 times, 30 times. The exercise component, like I always tell people, it's the easiest thing. But figuring out what it is that you want, right, is the hard work early on. Okay, but once you figure that out, that helps to lay down the foundation for your approach. Okay, so that's how my journeys with my clients typically start. And we don't necessarily talk about meditation right away, because again, meditation is a very inaccessible thing for people, right? So in the beginning, the movement is the meditation. In the beginning, the breathing from your belly. I always encourage, we call it diaphragmatic breathing, right? Most people, because they're very high with anxiety, they breathe from their shoulders. They breathe from their chest. They breathe from their neck. We call these accessory muscles, right? Your upper traps, right? So for me, early on, first session is really about being able to pull down from that solar plexus, from the belly, from the diaphragm, right? That makes a dramatic shift with most people very early, very quickly. There's no way that we could talk about posture, improving your posture, without figuring out where your center is. And this lends into how do we activate our core? We talk about core exercises, but what does that mean, right? What is your core, right? Introducing you to your core early on. How do we brace? How do we take the top rib, bring it down to the pelvis, create a wall here, an impenetrable wall, as though somebody's punching you right in the stomach, right? That's a brace. Whatever I'm doing, I'm always in that brace, but I can't get to that if I'm just in this shallow breathing place, right? So connecting the breath with the physical movement and having people understand how what's happening in your head, your anxiety, your depression, impacts you on a physical level as well. Okay, so a lot of people just are unable to make that connection, and how their depression is hooked up to their lower back pain, and vice versa for some other people. So that was a long-winded answer, but there's never one thing. But again, if we just run that back, breathing, very important. Okay, that's number one. Bringing that diaphragm down here. Figuring out your affirmations and your intentions, very, very important. That gives you your why. Once you're armed with your why, the what becomes a lot easier for you.
For sure, man. Well, my brother, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk with you, bro. I greatly appreciate it. And what I'm starting to do is as I'm getting further along, I started this podcast about a year and a half ago. Didn't realize how much it was going to take out of my time. And some of the people that I spoke with early on, man, they've made some leaps and bounds right now from when I first spoke to them. So definitely looking forward to talking to you again, bro, and see the next level, to see the next phase of Joe and the next chapter of Vega Method. And I know it's going to be incredible, bro, because you're so knowledgeable and you have such a gift and such a talent for what you do. So thank you so much for this time, brother. Appreciate you. And let them know where they can find you, how to get in touch with you.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you very much. Again, it's an honor. It's a blessing to be on here with you and to be able to talk with your community, this great platform that you're building. To find me, my website is vegamethod.com. So that'll give you some more background information on me. I have my hiking sessions that are coming up within the next couple of months. This first one's actually this Sunday coming up. And again, all that information is on the website. My handle on Instagram is Vega Method. And again, if you ever want to DM any questions, I love DMs. I'm looking to, again, push the envelope on the corporate wellness, but I'm also looking to take on new individual clients as well. If you go on my the bio link in my Instagram bio, you can sign up for my newsletter, and I always give away free stuff in my newsletter, whether it's a meditation, whether it's exercises, whether it's a recipe, something quick, something that you could cook up real quick in your kitchen. So yeah, man, we're going hard in 2023, man.
I'm looking forward to it, brother. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you again, bro.
Gotcha. Take care, man.